That makes sense.
As you can see from the notice that just came on your screen, we are recording this, and this session, like all our sessions, will be available on YouTube in the next few days. And all the previous GeogLives, numbers 1 to 10, can all be viewed there if you want to go back and have a look at some of the fabulous sessions we've had in the past. So Anthony, could we now move on to the next slide? Thank you very much. So as I've already said, we are recording this and it will be on YouTube later. Please do use the chat function. So far, I can see lots of people are using it to introduce themselves, which is lovely, but it's also there if you would like to ask any questions or make any comments on anything that you've heard. And we've not only got the fabulous early years team available tonight, but we've also got other members of EYPPC, the early years and primary phase committee of the Geographical Association here tonight. So between us, hopefully we can answer most of your questions, or if not, we know somebody who does know the answer. So moving on, Anthony, please. So my name's Julia Tanner. As I've already said, I'm very pleased to welcoming you all here tonight. I'm thrilled to bits that we have the Early Years Foundation team with us tonight. This is a group of people from the Early Years, from the Geographical Association Primary and Early Years Phase Committee, who have recently published some fabulous guidance, which if you're looking at me on the screen, you can see it's in this edition of Primary Geography, which was published in the spring. So I'm thrilled to say that tonight we've got with us Helen Martin, who is a head teacher of 2 schools in Sussex. We've got Paula Owens and Sharon Witt, both very well-known consultants who work in lots of areas of primary geography, and Emily Rochelle, who is a lecturer at the University of Roehampton in geography and early years education. And we've also got later on, I haven't seen him yet, but I assume John is with us, John Cannell, who is a member of staff at the Geographical Association with particular responsibility for primary work. So that is the team we have here tonight. Can we have the next slide, please, Anthony? Thank you. And a date for your diary. You may already be aware of this if you're a member of the Geographical Association, but if not, we're having a hybrid conference again this year as last year. So there is face-to-face conference happening at Sheffield Hallam University, right in the centre of town, the 13th to 15th of April, or you can come to some of the sessions online. If you go to the Geographical Association website, you'll easily be able to see how you can sign up for the hybrid conference, either in person or for the online elements of it. Thank you, Steve. Oh, nice to see you here, John. Hello. And now I'm going to hand over to Steve, who's going to say a little bit about the current Primary Geography magazine. Steve.
Thank you, Julia. This is the latest exciting edition of PG, which has a focus on hidden geographies, aiming to reveal the hidden treasures of primary geography and demonstrating, we hope, how it's a golden thread that entwines all the other subjects within a broad and balanced curriculum. We hope you like the dramatic cover. You probably have spent some time trying to work out what it is. As you can see, there are some brilliant articles within there. Becoming a plastic clever school, things like finding geography in song lyrics, finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Lots in there to read, enjoy, and put into action. If you're a member, you should now have received your paper copy of that and you can access it online. If you're not a member, then why not join the GA and benefit from the delights of hidden geography? And of course, the highlight probably of that particular edition is the pullout that comes with the journal, which shows how important geography is from the very earliest years and offers guidance about doing wonderful and effective geography right the way through the school, not just the early years, because the materials that are there could be applied to all age groups. It's all about big ideas, key concepts across geography education. And we're indebted to the team that produced that particular pullout. And of course, they are the ones that are going to take us through it tonight online. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm going to hand over now to Helen, who is going to lead the team taking us through geography in the early years. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Julia. Can everybody hear me? Am I, well done, people are waving at me, that's great. Welcome today to our special early years session. It's really great to be back on the screen talking to you about such an important part of children's education, and also such a great opportunity to be with a brilliant team of writers, Paula, Emily, Sarah and Sharon, three of which are here tonight to talk to you about the fantastic pull-out, as Steve was saying, in PG, and how that will help all of us in schools to focus our pedagogy and our thinking and our creativity and our love of geography. So we're very grateful that the document was funded by the Geographical Association Innovation Fund, and then written under Paula's leadership by Paula, Sharon, Emily and Sarah from our committee. Lots of creative conversations, which we hope to bring some of to you today. We want to champion and focus on geography today, but we are aware of the holistic nature of the EYFS curriculum, and that you, our EYFS practitioners, will always take every opportunity to enable the children to lead their own interests. So I'm speaking to you with my head teacher hat on, but also I've been teaching today at my infant school, so I come with the exhaustion that all of you will be sitting there with if you've been in the wet play scenario like we all have at school today. But just to begin with, an introduction to my setting. I'm head teacher of two very small rural schools, Grafham and Duncton in West Sussex. We're also fortunate to have a separate nursery on our site and sharing our building. And so I am inspired on a daily basis by the very skilled practitioners that I work alongside. Today, using the focus of the document as my guide, I'd like to champion you all as early years practitioners and the vital role you play. We hope as a committee you'll be guided by this document, and that there may be snippets, sections, pedagogy and ideas that lift your spirits as an early years practitioner. As a reminder for us all, the 2021 Early Years Foundation Stage document places history, RE and geography together as a section entitled Understanding the World. It is the second section, People, Culture and Communities, early learning goal, that is where our geographical knowledge firmly sits. Just to read this out, we can place our framework today and today's GeogLive into our context. We want them to describe their immediate environment using knowledge from observation, discussion, story, non-fiction text and maps, to know similarities and differences between different religious and cultural communities in this country, drawing on their own experiences, and we'll come back to a lot of that as we move through this session. Explain similarities and differences between life in this country and in other countries, drawing on their knowledge from stories, texts, and when appropriate, maps. And later on in the session, Paul will show you some more fantastic documentation about mapping, which you will be able to lean on beautifully to help you with mapping in that section. Anthony, may I have the next slide? Okay, so here is the document. The most fantastic part of it is that it is free. And so even if you are not a Geographical Association member, you would be able to click on the link, which I'm sure somebody is going to put in the chat in a minute, and you'll be able to download this and use this in your schools. Your conversations about pedagogy and about intent and implementation of the curriculum at any level throughout the early years can be guided by this document, and we really hope you enjoy leaning on it. Next slide, please, Anthony. Thank you. So we wanted to champion you, and as a head teacher, that is my job, to champion the amazing practitioners that are in my school. And I wanted today, in my little bit at the beginning, to champion you as early years practitioners. And you may be geography specialists, geography subject leaders, leaders in your school, leaders in your nursery that are listening today. And I wanted to tell you that you are amazing. You have a unique place in any setting or school. It is an incredibly amazing, challenging and difficult job, but you are always led by children's interests and you are guided by their joy and fun of learning. In the autumn term, this is never more apparent when you have a few or many new children to learn together with, and also to enjoy that new partnership with their families. You'll build on their lived experiences, and we'll all pick up on that point and link that to the EYFS as we go through tonight. You'll share their multiple stories with equity and a focus on their individual identities and what they can bring to us. And in these ever-changing times, you can hopefully empower our future citizens and planetary ambassadors. Thank you, Anthony. So I picked up some pictures from not only my nursery, but my reception classroom. I find it one of the most lovely places to be. I love having conversations with those young, very youngest learners, very youngest explorers and geographers. I'm extremely aware of the pressures that you are under every day. I'm aware if you are reception teachers here, you will have battled through the reception baseline, wishing that you weren't doing it because it seems to be completely against all of the things that you love so much. But you'll be doing tapestry, class dojo, supporting families with little English and those that have been through trauma. Everything will be piled on top of you, and the partnerships and identity of those families are so vital to you. But what I would like to champion today is, without your curiosity and excitement, the children won't access these provocations in the same way. And kneeling down, getting down on the floor, getting as messy as them is a great way to show them your interest and your enthusiasm. We need to be open and ready for their ideas. However young, they will astound you and surprise you and make you laugh. Be ready for you to learn from them. That's the joy of being with early years. Standing back and letting them explore and knowing when to question and notice. And words about the good things about the new EYFS, about we don't have to write so much, but what we do is we need to notice and observe and then question. I have a lovely story to tell you about one of our Ukrainian 2-year-olds in our nursery. We've had quite a high influx of Ukrainian families into our school recently. Our nursery manager wanted to share the importance of their identity in our setting. So there's an amazing folk tale called Kolobok, which she has worked with the parent to print out and make a book. She's learned all the pronunciation in the Ukrainian dialect for that family. She's explained them to the whole of the children in the nursery so that it can become part of their play and their continuous provision. And it will champion that child and the importance of her culture, her background and where she's just come from, and that can be celebrated within that classroom. Next slide, please, Anthony. So these photographs are the messiest ones that I could find, and we have become even more aware following lockdown and children learning at home that they need even more sensory and whole body experiences. The gross motor skills that geographical explorations provide can enhance or even begin the long road to writing stamina. We've changed our outdoor area at school since lockdown because we discovered that gross motor skills were not as far forward as they usually are when children come to us. So we've had to change it to a lot more climbing and reaching and whole body movements in order to move towards the writing stamina and the writing movements we need. We need them to touch new things, to gather materials that have never been felt before. We need them to be messy, muddy, wet and smiling. And we're also developing those fine and gross motor skills that we need. Thank you, Anthony. My final slide. As a head, I just want to finish on an additional point. Fitting in all of this high quality continuous provision is hard to do. I spoke to my reception teacher this week. We were mulling over fitting in phonics with reception year 1, spelling with year 2, guided reading with the phonics scheme. And then we went in to talk about continuous provision and where we were at with the next stage of that. We're a very small school and we quickly run out of adults, especially with mixed age classes. But we decided we have to be kind to ourselves. We know how challenging it is, but remember to watch your own well-being. You also need to take time to stand and notice, to smile, to get muddy, to observe, and to share your love of place and people too. You'll have fascinating discussions and exciting challenges as these young children share their lived experiences, their heritage, their cultures, their language and family. To start where the child is to start with the geographer within them, to discover and enhance how these shape these amazing young people. Creativity and possibility are their normal. Explore with them and guide them. So I'm going to pass over to Paula, who's going to carry on with the next part of the session. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Helen, and good evening, everybody. I'm going to start by just thinking about babies, just for a minute. I'll let you look at this rather gorgeous baby on the screen. And we've already talked about how geography is a very holistic subject and how it's sort of captured across the whole of the EYFS, as it should be, because of the holistic way of learning. And there is this wonderful quote that I'm going to introduce you to from Christopher Spencer about how when you're doing geography, you are doing something of real importance in that you are helping the development of that tiny child's self-identity. And if you think about how we relate to places from the earliest times throughout our lives, geography can really help us understand how we relate to places, how we grow, and how we develop these essential memories. Next slide, please, Anthony. But it's not just Christopher Spencer who thinks that, as well as lots of other people. It's also Ofsted. So I'm going to mention Ofsted here and let you read this quote. So it's just a recognition of the key role that geography can play in facilitating the child's development across the whole spectrum of learning, and particularly in the social and emotional aspects of learning. And geography is very crucial in building these vital relationships with others and with places. And in doing so, again, this sense of belonging, which is so highly significant. Thank you, Anthony. So perhaps we've got a problem then, because Ofsted want us to identify the strands of progression from the EYFS across to year 6. And if geography is found everywhere, how do we identify it? So we would say, look for these key concepts and pick out these key concepts which are hopefully very prevalent in the knowledge and understanding of the world, but can also be picked up across the other areas of learning as well. So, for example, here are some concepts identified in this picture, particularly place, space and scale and environment. And these are everyday aspects of learning and questions that we can pick up on in our planning and in our focus with young children. The very important spatial dimension, which is so crucial to geography and which shouldn't get overlooked, is the where am I? How do I have the language and the opportunity to talk about where I am in relation to other places? And this links beautifully with mathematical language, of course. And then talking about places and about the affordance of place, what we can do in places, what places are like. And there's obviously a strong emphasis on this very rich vocabulary, thinking about making everyday connections as well. So just simple things like this, we can pick up these threads of geography, these vital early concepts, and develop them through. And in the document, I've just got an extract here to show you. We thought we'd give you an example of water. In the early years, we've got water play, we've got very messy activities with water in which children learn to think about what water's like, what it does, but also where it comes from and how we can use it. And we can see how that can be developed into learning about just early kinds of water features in Key Stage 1, canals and rivers, and then thinking about that more complex understanding of water cycles and trade and development and natural resources in Key Stage 2. So there is a direct link all the way through from these earliest beginnings. Thank you, Anthony. Geography has an aspect of enabling children to develop this disciplinary understanding, which means we can help them to think like young geographers. So there are different aspects to this, and these are identified in this flower that we've got on the document. The sense of belonging that we've mentioned quite a lot, but also deepening that sense of curiosity by enabling children to learn to ask better questions. Enabling children to listen to other people's experiences and talk with each other about how we might feel differently about places, about how we've got different favourite places in the playground, for example. So developing this empathy and talking about this with stories about places that we can't visit through first-hand experience. So through this, we develop our relationships, and we can also model as practitioners how we can notice places, take care of places, and model action as well out of doors. We can also teach children to learn to risk take and manage their local environment as well, and be confident explorers. Thank you, Anthony. So just a summary of some ways that supported practitioners foster this geographical learning. And there's lots of modelling and scaffolding, and obviously we need to have enabling environments, which Sharon is going to talk about in a moment. But we want to really encourage and support children to imagine what places might be like as well as what they're like, and encourage them to notice the everyday detail close up and to have the language and the spatial language in particular to talk about places. And we need to be ready to intervene and to scaffold as appropriate. Thank you, Anthony.
Okay, thank you very much, Paula. And I'm going to lead on from that to talk about enabling environments for geographical learning, which are so key for fostering the curiosity, the awe and wonder, exploration, investigation, play, creativity, and risk-taking. So this slide shows a whole range of provocations for fostering this geographical learning. So it might be taking walks, welly walks maybe, routes and trails, perhaps creating and nurturing opportunities for placemaking, for den building, for junk modelling, for creating through construction play. It may be that you are telling stories, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, and through creating sensory tables of natural and found objects. And thanks very much, I think, to Emily for these wonderful photos, and Emily's students as well. It may be that your school, your setting can provide equipment for different types of weather, such as wellies and waterproofs, and a variety of diagrams, maps, aerial images, globes, and atlases. The most important thing is to consider how you are providing quality provision for outdoor, indoor, and emotional environments. Thank you, Anthony. Next slide, please. So enabling environments, through enabling environments, we need to make sure that we are telling multiple stories, different stories of place and people. It's really important that the children can see themselves, their families, and their communities in the images and the artifacts and the stories that we use. And also that they reflect the culturally, socially, technology, and ecologically diverse worlds in which we share. Thank you, Anthony. So this is a slide of a learning support assistant that I worked with, and she is guiding the children to engage in some small world play around a cold places topic. As the children start to play, they begin by adding their penguin first, and then some ice, and then a polar bear joins the play. And here an opportunity emerges for the adult to challenge the children's thinking, to pose questions about their choices. Do polar bears and penguins live together in the wild? So here we have lots of opportunities to investigate and to ask further questions and to engage with the children's developing thinking about places and habitats. Play, playfulness, and playful encounters are really at the heart of young children's geographical learning. And it's important that we provide a variety of contexts to challenge and to engage their questions and to work with ideas, materials, and places. Through this play, the children can generate purposeful talk and promote vocabulary development and their imagination. Thank you, Anthony. Next slide. So David Sobel is an American environmental educator. He's one of my favorites, and I use him quite a lot when I engage with practitioners. And he suggests that when we are planning for enabling environments outdoors, when we're looking to engage children with the natural world, we should include 7 play motifs. And these include engaging the children with fantasy and imagination, taking the children on adventures that engage both the mind and the body and also incorporate some risk, create small worlds with our children so that we can attend to the sensory particulars of a place. What do they hear? What do they see? What do they touch? What can they feel in this place? Creating special places or being with special places is also a really important aspect of their playful environments. Noticing and recognizing animal allies and developing friendships with the animals and the plants within that area is really important. Also, hunting and gathering and collecting found objects. Perfect at the moment to collect some leaves and make some wonderful artwork with those. And of course, following and making maps and paths. Thank you, Anthony. Stories, as ever, provide a wonderful resource. And this is one of my favorites, the Bog Baby. I've used it a lot with very young children. It's wonderful to create your own bog baby friend, to talk about what is a bog like, to share and think about bog baby environments. What kind of places would a bog baby like to live in? Damp, wet places, and then to maybe go and look for these on an exploration, on a journey around your local area. Perhaps you could show these on a messy map. And perhaps you could leave your bog baby companion for a while to live in their environment. All of this would provide a wonderful opportunity to think about sense of place, to explore feelings and think about issues regarding habitats that perhaps could be under threat. Thank you, Anthony. And just to finish, A few words and thoughts from Robert Macfarlane, who's a nature writer who talks a lot about young children and place. And he suggests that young children remind us how we as adults should engage in place. And particularly if they are given time and freedom to explore and play, children inhabit multiple worlds and they move very easily between the real world and a fantasy world. So a puddle is never a puddle to a child, or never just a puddle to a child. It's a portal to an undersea realm. A hollow in a tree is never just a hollow. It could be the opening to an elf home or a gnome's lair. So children see landscape as a place of activity and think about it as teeming with opportunities and possibilities. And I think I really love this last quote from Robert Macfarlane. What we bloodlessly call place is to young children a wild compound of dream and spell and substance. Place is never somewhere, they're always in, but never on. Thank you, Anthony. And I'm just going to hand over now to Emily. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. So thinking about maps in the early years, of course, lots of practitioners have been using maps in the early years for years and years. But as Helen told us, now they're a statutory part of the early years framework. We've been thinking about how they might be used a bit more. So perhaps you'd like to put in the chat any maps you've used with early years children or any map work you've been doing with them. It'd be lovely to hear what you've been sharing. But in terms of different types of maps we can use and talk about, we can use story maps. We can use those maps that look like play maps that you have on the floor in your early years setting. We can use simple world maps, perhaps even a simple globe. And I'm loving some of the ideas you've come in with as well. Story maps are really popular. Quite often teacher drawn maps, and I'll show you a couple of examples from my students in a minute, potentially atlases as well. And some of these might link to some of the other things like familiar repeated walks. Research shows us that children are more likely to remember a route if they stop at particular points along that route the next time they do it. So that's leading on to life skills as well. And that links to the next point, of course, which is to visit, talk and record about different landmarks on these routes you might be taking. And so much opportunity to do these in your setting, both there and in the local environment, also indoors and outdoors. You can take walks in both, or maybe even a combination of those. I loved Helen's quotes about having children who were muddy, messy, wet and smiling, which I think links really well to exploring places through sensory interactions. It may also be that you're using different senses when using and constructing your own maps. So you might have 2D maps, you might have 3D maps, you might have maps in your sand trail or maps in your outdoor setting. You might have story characters that you're using in your maps. So I think maps are a really good facilitator of sort of multisensory learning in the early years. And I think everything we've been talking about so far really links well with using language with the children as and when appropriate with their map work. So it might include directions, it might include positional vocabulary. It might be encouraging them to talk about a map that they've designed or a map that they're following or using in the classroom. And of course, one of the most important things about map making is collaborative play and play mapping. But just before we move on to the next slide, there's a couple of things I want you to consider when you're using maps in your early years, and perhaps suggest some ways that you might overcome these as well. So you might want to think about the scale of the maps. I'm sure I think this is particularly the case in early years. A lot of us have seen a map where a dog or a horse is the same size as a house. And that can bring up some really interesting discussion with young children if you find examples of those. Again, you might want to think about scale. how accurate is the scale? How accurate does it need to be? Has anyone ever stretched a map on PowerPoint or something like that, only to find out it's very distorted? So there's all these sorts of things. Something else that is suggested for children in early years is looking at maps from an oblique aerial view. So that's one at an angle and means they can see the shape of the buildings, which makes them much easier to identify. So if you're getting children who are struggling with that aerial view, have it at an angle, which quite often they're shown like that in the play maps and things anyway. And then I would say, think about broadening the children's experiences of stereotypes, because quite often in infant atlases or early years atlases, you might have one picture on a continent, which may be difficult to move away from that stereotyping or single image. So just other things for you to consider. Thank you, Anthony. Next slide, please. So thinking about maps again, and thinking about plans. So finding a definition of a plan rather than a map is incredibly difficult. But after a lot of work, I managed to find one, which was actually from a children's information book that says that children's understanding of plan form, or looking at an outline directly from above, is one of the most important. And a plan shows the relative positions of its different parts, for example, the rooms of a house, and a map shows the distribution of places. So most of you have probably got a plan of your school. Quite often, everyone will have a fire evacuation plan, but we're told that children are better using large, colourful maps. So you might have a map of your classroom, you might have a map of your school, a map of a building, something like that. Officially, those would be plans. The two images below are just some suggestions of maps you might have linked to stories or linked to children's interests in terms of the treasure hunt one. And they were both designed by some students at the university I work at. I'm loving seeing all the suggestions coming in. So I don't know whether someone might want to chat about those in a little while as well. Brilliant. Thank you, Anthony. Last of my slides, please. So just to refer you to a couple more documents in terms of mapping. So one of my PGCE students last year had an excellent idea of actually creating a map of their early years setting and then using that to show the provision that would work in each of those. So as you can see, of course, with early years, it's very cross-curricular. And they did an indoor and an outdoor one. So we've just got the indoor example there. And then in the primary geography summer edition from this year, Sarah talks about her setting in a reception class using maps last year. And I think Paula is now going to tell you about an amazing document from Ordnance Survey that she wrote. Thank you, Paula.
Oh, thanks, Emily. I'm just briefly going to add another resource to some of the wonderful resources being put in the chat. So do keep your eye on the chat, because there are some great ideas in there, and some great links back to GA resources as well. This is a free document. I've just put the link in the chat now, which I hope works. It's produced by the Ordnance Survey, and it's just guidance on mapping in the early years. And it's not specifically about geography, it's about the role that maps can play across the entire curriculum. And there's just an extract example there, just giving you some of this scope of mapping and how it might be used. Thank you, Anthony. And this is just one example from it. And this is some work I did with some reception children recently, where I asked them to create some maps in groups of their school grounds from memory. And they came up with these amazing maps using a mixture of drawn features and found objects, and then explained to me in great detail where these different places were in relation to each other and the kind of things you can do there. And what this does, it just reminds us how very capable very young children are of thinking abstractly in a spatial sense and creating maps, and just thinking about if they can do this from memory, what can they do if you actually go out and map in the field as well. So it just shows a huge capability that children have got. Thank you, and that's me finished. I'm going to hand you back to Helen for a summary now.
Thank you, Paula. My cat's joining in on the summary at the end of the session, so I'm sorry about that. What a fantastic session of ideas. And before I pass you back to Julia to introduce John and some questions towards the end, I just wanted to remind us about what this session and this document is about. Children at the heart of our curriculum making, our decision making, the power of the children as curriculum makers, and of course, as you as practitioners, bringing your curiosity and your interests there, to bring your first-hand experiences into the outdoor environments, to bring different stories around the world, and to bring their views of identity to the fore, and to enable holistic learning. And that last quote of Ofsted enables us to help our children to become experts in this subject. And just a final thought, I'm hoping that after Sharon's brilliant explanation about bog babies, that we may all wander out into our school fields, our playgrounds, our pavements and our streets, and just watch out for little blue bog babies that might be finding their way around the whole of the country. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been really useful for you, and I will pass back to Julia.
Thank you, Helen. On your screen now is a list of references and resources that you might want to go to. I'd like to thank the early years team so much for that absolutely brilliant introduction they've given us to geographical learning in the early years. Just illustrating the huge range of potential and possibilities in early years practice for helping children to understand the world, their place in it, and how places relate to one another. That is just absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Paula, Emily, Helen and Sharon. It's just brilliant. And of course, anybody who would like to know more, do look at the document. I know that the presentation we've seen today is very closely based on the document, which, as we said, is freely available to everybody. And I know somebody has put in the chat how you can access that, whether you're a member of the Geographical Association or not. I can also see lots and lots of ideas coming in for using maps in the early years, which is absolutely fantastic. I think, Emily, you would like people to email you if they're prepared to share, which would be, yeah, which would be lovely. So please do take a note of Emily's email address there if you would like to share more. It's really lovely to see so many people offering suggestions and sharing with us examples of their existing good practice. I don't know if there are any questions coming in. I'm going to hand over to John, and I'm going to ask the GeogLive team to check for questions that we can come back to in a moment. So if we could move on to John's slide, please, Anthony. And John, if you could come in. Thank you very much. Lovely to have you here, John, today. I'll hand over to you while people are coming up with their questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. I really enjoyed that today. And just going back to the edition of primary geography that's out at the moment, that one is available for members right now, but as are all of the other back catalogue. So Emily mentioned her article with Sarah from, was that summer this year or spring this year? But right back to 2005, when there was an article on inquiry in the early years. And all of those, when you become a GA member, you have access to that full back catalogue. So it's a great resource to tap into. Anthony, next slide. I'm going to be quite quick. I just wanted to highlight some of the resources we've got available, specifically for early years. We've got the early years handbook, and that's something that at the moment we're looking to update and create a newer version of. Leading primary geography, I probably put this on every slide every time, but it's key across all phases within the primary age range. And then one of the atlases that we recommend and we sell is the First Atlas by Collins, aimed at 4+ years old. So it's obviously relatively simplified. Thanks, Anthony. We obviously champion Barnaby Bear, and it's possible to purchase a hand puppet of Barnaby Bear, and also explore through various resources that are available. Again, you can find them in the shop. There's a more generic link there. Next, thanks, Anthony. And at this, there's a couple of slides here of just the sorts of resources we provide to increase your knowledge, because sometimes not having any subject knowledge in geography makes it difficult when children have little conversations to sort of join those conversations. So getting some sort of knowledge boosts, if you like, which is what the In the Know series provide. And it's all written specifically with primary teachers in mind, so early years and primary teachers in mind. And it just enables us to be uncluttered, if you like, and not to have that cognitive overload that we know that we don't want to provide for the children. But at the same time, if we're swatting up the day before on something, then our brains are not pulling and drawing through information from our long-term memory either. So having this sort of resource is vital to us as teachers. Next, thanks, Anthony. I think somebody mentioned one of these earlier on in the chat. Was that the Everyday Guide to Story? That I think, Julia, did you co-write this one with Jane? Do I remember?
I co-wrote it, yeah.
Yeah, co-wrote that one. And did you edited some of the others as well, didn't you? I think you edited all of them, your series editor. And great, you know, fantastic ideas for use, again, across early years and into primary, focusing around story and maps and art and fieldwork, excuse me, locational knowledge and maths, and their connection with geography. Thanks, Anthony. We also have a range of CPD packages. And again, one of our writers is just presented to you. So Paul has put together a lot of these. Julie's put together one of them as well. And these will, again, just help you bring staff along on the journey, which I think is really important. And I think there might be one more, Anthony. It was mentioned at the beginning, but I just wanted to flag it again at the end. It's our annual conference this year, well, this academic year, 13th to 15th of April, and it's up in Sheffield. And having already looked at and been privy to look at the range of workshops and lectures available, there are a lot that have got a huge amount of relevance for primary teachers, for EYFS, and also as knowledge boosts. So lots of lectures that might be aimed at Key Stage 3 or Key Stage 4 that will give you the background information to be able to deliver well in the classroom. So that's it for me. Thank you, Julia.
Okay, so I'll take over from here. Thank you, John. I'm going to come back to the GeogLive team in a minute to ask you if you spotted some questions that we may be able to answer. But before I do that, as you can see, we've got a slide here about joining the Geographical Association. As you'll have realised, we're all members, and there are lots of reasons to join the GA, but the most important one is access to the fabulous information that we have available. All our resources are much reduced if you're a member of the GA, and it does give you all sorts of other opportunities to be involved with all things geography. There is free primary membership, which has some limited opportunities to do all the things that the GA offers, but many people choose to upgrade to full membership, which I think is about £40 a year. I'm not sure exactly how much it is, but I would recommend you go and have a look at the site that's on the screen there about joining the Geographical Association. Okay, GeogLive team, has anybody found any questions that we could usefully do? Please put your cameras back on now if you'd like to. We won't ask you to unmute, but if you would put your cameras back on, that would be lovely. And we'll see who wants to ask and answer questions. So, GeogLive team, have we got some questions?
Julia, can I just say lots of people have been mentioning Digimaps.
Yes.
And it's probably just nice to tell people, which I think Sophie has mentioned already, that there's lots of free resources on Digimaps that you don't have to log in for.
Yeah.
So I'll post a link to the resources in the chat for everyone.
That is brilliant, Emily. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, there are fabulous resources available through Digimap, many of them created by teachers and some of them by Paula to support teaching and learning with maps. And of course, if you've got a subscription to Digimaps, you can access the most phenomenal range of mapping for your local area and everywhere else. It's just the most brilliant resource. I can't recommend it highly enough. Any other questions coming in?
Hi, there's been lots of questions about if anybody knows whether there is a progression in vocabulary document or any information on vocabulary which would be appropriate to use with the EYFS.
Right. Does anybody want to pick that up from the EYFS team? Paula?
I don't know of a document as such, but I will just say that vocabulary in the early years has been shown to be really excellent, and actually sometimes it grows much faster than it does at the onset of the national curriculum from year 1 onwards, mainly because of the requirement to plan for outdoor learning. And what I would say though is in teaching children to recognise and name everyday features out of doors, it's quite good to use labelling out of doors as well as indoors, and get children involved in making and creating signs and pictures and labels and that kind of thing. But because of that planning requirement, the rate that the children acquire vocabulary is normally much faster than during the national curriculum years.
Thank you very much, Paula. Are there any other questions that anybody spotted that we could answer now?
Julia, just to say that Sharon has an answer, I think, as well.
Oh, sorry, Sharon.
No worries.
So many people on my screen, I can't see everybody. Go on.
No worries. I just wondered whether, just following up from what Paula was suggesting, the Cambridge Curiosity and Imagination website has an awful lot of work where with early years children, where they've taken early years children into the woods and promoted imagination and vocabulary. One of the lovely examples, I think it's called Spinny Wood. They are a charity and they do lots of arts-based work with children outdoors and adults. But one of their lovely examples is they create knowledge markers out of on wood, and they write and leave them in the woods to promote vocabulary of various features. And so that might be one for people to look up. Lots of examples of children's agency and adults guiding and supporting vocabulary development.
Oh, that's really helpful, Sharon. Thank you very much indeed. I could just say that a lot of Geographical Association teaching publications include vocabulary. So all the everyday guides have got very extensive vocabulary lists, as have some of our other publications. I think somebody has just asked, hang on a minute. Sorry, I'm trying to do too many things at once here. Right, Mandy. Mandy was asking, does the GA have any planning for units if you join as a school? Well, we do have exactly that. We have some super schemes, about 20 super schemes, which cover various aspects of primary geography. We also have Geography Plus, and there are lots and lots of ideas in the everyday guide. I've probably forgotten some. Can anybody think of any I've forgotten straight away? But all of those do have vocabulary guides, as well as being medium-term planning to support you in school.
Julia, also yes. Upcoming in an edition of Primary Geography is a planning unit for early years on maps.
Oh, brilliant. I didn't know about that. That's great, Emily.
With a downloadable medium-term plan. It's Stephen Pickering's issue, but I can't remember which one that is.
Spring, I think, or is it summer? Summer. Thank you, Steve. Yeah. Okay. Is there any other questions that we should be answering? Anthony?
Thanks, everybody. What a wonderful evening. Thanks very much for joining with us. I've got a feedback link that we'd love you to complete, if you could, please, in the chat. But just on the vocabulary point, I think there are a lot of people asking about this. And I heard from a school recently, they said they just have 10 keywords per unit. And if you think about that growing from the early years, By the time you get to year 6, that's 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10. That's a lot of individual words. And there are lots of words associated with those words that are important, but there were just 10 per year that they'd drawn from their planning that was already there. So this wasn't a kind of new list that needed to be imposed. And it was a very simple solution to that request that sometimes people have to have that progressive list. But it's really important to remember that the progression needs the 10 plus the 10 plus the 10 plus the 10, so it grows quite a lot, and you can't just presume it's learnt in year 1, because it has to be remembered in year 6 as well and understood. And it's that understanding that I'd really ask you to think about if you're creating those sorts of lists.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Anthony. Thank you very much indeed. Could I ask if somebody could put in the chat links to the GA shop, to the Geog Plus units, and the super schemes. They're all on one page. If somebody could do that, and anybody could access those if they wanted to look at the detail. Okay, I'm conscious of the time. In fact, it's 2 minutes to finish time. So I need to thank you all very much indeed for coming. I hope it's been useful. I've certainly found it extremely stimulating and interesting. I'm not an early years specialist myself. It's absolutely lovely to hear from those people who are really expert and really embedded in this area. So thank you very much, Paula, Helen, Sharon and Emily, and also Sarah, who contributed to the document, isn't able to be with us tonight. I'd like to invite you all to come to the next session of GeogLive, which is on January the 18th. It's a Wednesday. We always have our sessions on a Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. And the title of that one is A World in Books. I think several people have already mentioned we're going to focus on the use of picture, story and fiction books right across the whole primary age range. Sophie, who is another member of the GeogLive team, and I are both really passionate about using fiction and story right through the age range in the geography. As we've already had one example from Sharon about using Bog Baby as a stimulus, but there are many, many other examples, and we really hope to see lots of you there on the 18th of January to enjoy the next GeogLive. So can I finish, unless there's anything else I need to say? Anybody tell me if I've forgotten anything? Okay, thank you GeogLive team. They're working very hard behind the scenes. Thank you very much. And thank you again to our presenters tonight. Okay, I hope you all have a great evening. It's a bit early, but happy Christmas and see you in January.